Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 228 of The Team House. I'm Jack Murphy, here with David Park. Our guest on tonight's show is Aaron Hale. Aaron served as an explosive ordnance technician in Afghanistan, severely injured, but made an incredible recovery. There's a lot to talk about here, and we're just really pleased and really happy to have you on the show tonight, Aaron.
Boss's lows. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me on. Really pumped to be on the show.
Thank you, man. Thank you. We appreciate having you here. I will ask you the first question that we ask all of our guests about your origin story. If you can tell us a little bit about your upbringing and that path that took you towards military service.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, mine isn't one of the, gung-ho kids that played soldier boy, as a kid and just knew his direction. In fact, just the opposite. I was a Midwestern kid, loved my childhood, adolescence, had enough natural ability, talent, to just skate by. So I was really an all-American slacker, and B's, C's, and the rest BS. When I got to college, everybody who knew how to work, quickly passed me by, and I soon found myself out of my butt, a whole lot of tuition pissed away, and really embarrassed and trying to figure out what to do with my life. And so one thing that I can do and have been doing for my whole life is have this ability to just make decisions and act and go. And I loved cooking. So, ever since I could reach over the counter, I loved the culinary arts. I decided, I'm going to go in a whole other direction. I'm going to go to culinary school, except I need, before I go to another college, another university, and try. First, I need those internal, the internal values, the core skills, work ethic, ambition, all that kind of stuff, and set some goals for myself and be productive. And also, I needed to earn some more tuition money, so that's when I decided, the military was exactly what could answer all of that for me. I joined the Navy in 1999 as a cook, and they gave me everything that I was looking for. The early mornings, the fitness, the work ethic, and a whole lot more. So that's what led me towards the military. It was kind of failing up, and I found that soon, right after basic and the Navy's A school, cooking school, I was on shore duty in Italy, and I worked my way up to cooking for the commander of the U.S. 6th Fleet, 3-star, in charge of all the Navy troops in the Mediterranean and Eastern Atlantic seaboard, and that was fantastic. Got to cook real food, got to tour around the Mediterranean in the flagship. And that's not, those 6-month Westpac cruises. It's 3 months or less, maybe 1 or 2 months. You hit 3 ports in the Mediterranean, run up the flag, throw a reception, and then scoot right back to Naples, Italy. To Italy. But
what was that like, Nathan? Like some of the differences just as a Navy cook. I mean, it sounds working your way up. I mean, there must have been those times where you're cooking up slop for hundreds of sailors on the ship, And then it sounds like maybe you had this opportunity where you were cooking like restaurant style food later on.
The truth is, no, I never did that.
Okay.
I spent 4 years in Italy. First duty station was actually barracks duty. No kidding. They don't tell you this at A school. They don't tell. I think they've switched the jobs around a little bit, but they used to look at it like hotel restaurant management on the civilian side. So I get off the plane. They tell me I'm working shore duty instead of sea duty on board a ship, and so, my sponsor met me at the airfield, and for one of the first questions was, where am I going to be cooking? They're like, oh no, we don't cook on shore duty. And what do? You're going to be, because you're the FNG, you're going to be night watch at the BEQ.
Oh,
at
that's
the desk, taking in trouble call tickets.
Yeah.
Yeah. I worked my way up to like the officer quarters front desk, and then the maintenance department. So I was taking trouble call tickets from the residents and walking them over to the public works, the local national Italians. But cool thing about that was I was escorting these guys through the rooms, and everywhere I went, como se dice, how do you say this? How do you say that? And I was learning Italian and drinking a ton of espresso in their office all day long. But the funny thing was I was learning Napolitan Italian, which is about the furthest thing you can get from book Italian.
Right.
And I was learning it from these public works roughnecks, electricians, plumbers. So anytime I traveled, even off duty, I would do like MWR trips out to Rome, Milan, that kind of stuff. I would try speaking the lingo because I was actually enjoying my time there. But all the Italians would look at me like, what are you doing? You must live in Naples.
That's hilarious.
But it was hilarious.
I gotta give a quick shout out to Augusta Precious Metals, the sponsor for tonight's show. Text team to 68592 or go to AugustaPreciousMetals.com, and we'll talk about them in a few minutes. Well, please continue, Aaron. Sorry for the interruption. So you had to fight just to do your job, in a sense. Like, you had to work your way up to doing the job you wanted to do.
Yeah, it's what I really wanted to do at the time, at least, was cook.
Yeah.
And instead, I was wasted away at night at the night watch, and then I was having fun hanging out with the Italians, but it wasn't really,
What you were looking for.
So the base commander would sometimes throw parties, little receptions at his villa, and ask for cooks from the barracks to help cater the thing. So I would I would volunteer in my off time, and this was just to keep the skills sharp, do some cooking somewhere. And when it was time to PCS, it just so happens about 45 minutes away in Gaeta, Italy, there was a billet open for flag duty. And it was a special position which required a letter of reference from somebody higher up. And because I'd been working for the CO and his wife, I got that letter and got my foot in the door to cook for the Admiral. And what's really cool about cooking for flagships is that's often that rung between the big blue Navy and places like Camp David and the White House and even Air Force One.
Aaron, can you, because you're the first, we've talked before about how hard cooks in the military work, but we've never actually had somebody on. Can you tell us a little bit about the A school? Because the basic skills, because one of the advantages that people don't know about as a military, especially in the Navy, because of the different mess decks, that you can go on to very advanced training in culinary arts. But can you tell us a little bit about the A school? How long was it? And then, like, what types of things did they cover over, in that school?
Navy A school, there were two major areas of study. And I think it's about 10 weeks, I think, total. And 8 of them were sanitation. Don't kill the sailors. And the other 2 weeks were how to read and execute on the recipe cards. It's like a publication, like an Army reg on Army publication on how to make food. There's a recipe card for everything. If there isn't a recipe card, then it doesn't exist, and you shouldn't make it. And it was how to make it perfectly bland, so everybody was pissed off.
Right, right. That's amazing. So
I almost got myself in trouble by making guacamole not taste like, well, making it taste like guacamole.
right. So sort of the opposite of like Hell's Kitchen or something like that, where everybody's tasting to be the most bland and unoffensive as you can possibly be, or inoffensive.
Well, it's the training school for the big Navy, and they want to make sure that, like I said, the cooks don't kill the crew.
Right.
So it really was how to make sure that everything about sanitation standards and cleaning and food cooking temperatures, all that kind of stuff. And there is really quite a bit of it. And then the rest of it was just making sure you can follow instructions on a recipe card.
Yeah.
Then once you get out there, there really are a lot of opportunities for chefs to advance into some really incredible billets and take some really cool schools. In fact, every year, I think there's a joint services cooking competition, and it's on the Food Network and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
So when you took this billet at the flag position, did they offer you advanced training before you went, or did you just kind of go as you were?
I went straight there.
Okay.
I did get some training during, and I was in Italy. I got the OJT type of training and off-duty training, just being in one of the major centers of culinary arts, Italy.
Yeah.
The funny thing was, though, that it's home ported there. Forward home ported in Gaeta, Italy. So everybody it's like a floating office most of the time when it's in port. And the admiral goes in for breakfast, lunch, and close of business. Everybody hangs up their uniform and goes back out into the economy. I made breakfast and lunch, and then I was done by like 2:00, 1400. I was gone to clean up the kitchen. And but the one major rule was the admiral said, absolutely no Italian food. My American cooks are not allowed to make Italian food while we're in port. Why would I have you guys cook that stuff when we're here?
Right. Right.
So I couldn't practice what I learned on him.
Right.
But, we get out to sea, of course. We got all 4 meals to practice on the guy and the rest of his staff.
So when you say 4 meals, are you including like midnight rats in that? Is that the 4th meal for people who aren't familiar with it? Yeah.
Yeah, we would do mid-rats because even everybody, the ship runs, and that was the difference between. It's kind of the difference in flagships. You've got the ship's company with the skipper, the CO, and that's one whole command, and then you've got the fleet command with the admiral and his staff. That's a separate command altogether. So it made for interesting rivalries sometimes, being on the flag staff on board the ship underway, and they would be doing general quarters and stuff like that, and running fire drills, and I just kind of, can I get by? I got to get up to officer country. But it was a pretty incredible time, and I learned quite a bit. And also, was terrific having an espresso machine on board.
Yeah, it must have been cool that, I mean, you were at that point exactly where you wanted to be, doing exactly what you wanted to do.
Actually, once I'd reached I guess you would say it was the pinnacle of what being a cook in the Navy was going to offer me. I became a little disenfranchised. Became a little restless. I'd gotten those skills, I'd gotten those abilities, those core values that I'd come for. I'd earned the GI Bill. Of course, now it's like 5 years. I was going to do the 4 now, and it's already 6 years later. And I love the Navy. I had salt in my veins. I love being at sea. And I also love cooking, but there was something about being a Navy cook that just wasn't testing the skills. It wasn't challenging me the way I wanted to be challenged. Plus, I joined in '99, time of peace. By the time I had left the Admiral's command, we were in 2 wars.
Right.
And we've been out floating, doing our figure eights and, in our box in the middle of the Mediterranean and commanding, the Navy. But I myself, yes, all of the jobs are important. Every role is, necessary in the effort. But I was watching the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan on TV, on the ship. And I don't know. There was something telling me I was not where I needed to be. I wasn't where I was supposed to be. So when I got back to the United States, I volunteered to go as an individual augmentee to a provincial reconstruction team in Farah, Afghanistan. Of course, I'd still be cooking, but now I would be right in the middle of it, right? Almost. We were way out west in Farah, south of Herat. It was so far in the middle of nowhere in the desert. Even the Taliban were like, "You can have it." But it was actually so quiet. There was nothing. People were getting in trouble for being bored, that kind of thing. But I switched from cooking for the Admiral and 35 of his staff to like 500-600 ISAF troops, Americans, Portuguese, Spanish, even some Italian special forces down from Herat. So I got to practice some of the lingo and trade for some more espresso. It was fantastic. It was a great experience. And that's when I met some EOD technicians.
Now, were they American? Were they Army? Were they Navy? Who were the EOD techs that you met when you're out there?
We trained up actually in that was the funniest thing. A bunch of Navy and Air Force components from all around the fleet, cooks, admin, civil affairs, all going to Fort Bragg for a slap together basic training to teach us how to army. And that's when I met a pair of Navy EOD technicians, and they helped us understand the UXO and IED threat that we'd be facing out there, or potentially if we ever left a wire. Unfortunately, these guys were awesome. It was Chief Miracle and AO in Poland. Those guys were really, really cool dudes. But they switched out by the time we made it in theater. And there were a few Air Force techs assigned to the FOB. And those guys rotated out, I don't know, every 3 or 4 months. But it was a little bit after, I'd already learned what EOD was about, but it wasn't until I got to know these guys. And I remember one day I was leaving the chow hall. I was heading back towards the barracks area, and these Air Force techs it was like dumped out all of their gear to do maintenance checks on everything, bomb suits, the robots, all the other gear, testing batteries, making sure everything was clean. And it was like a cool guy yard sale. So I went out there, struck up a conversation, learned, just chatting away and learning more about the job. The tight-knit brotherhood, the technical aspect of the job, the critical thinking skills you really need, and the fact that they're first responders on the battlefield. They're running into the danger when everybody else is running away.
Yeah.
I mean, everything about it just clicked into place. And that's what I knew I needed to do. So I put in a request with the Navy to go from cook to bomb squad.
And what year was that?
It didn't go very well.
Yeah.
No, they kicked it back, said no. Everything can be waived. Nobody wants to tell you. But my rank in that job was undermanned. So not only did they not want me to leave cooking, I guess they liked my cooking too much. But they also weren't going to promote me.
Oh, wow.
So when I returned from Afghanistan, my contract was about up. It was re-enlistment or walk. And I took my service record and I walked and went over to the Army recruiter and told them what I wanted to do, and they welcomed me right in.
They did you a little dirty there. That's too bad.
Yeah, it was a shame because I really loved being in the Navy.
Right.
It was cool.
Yeah, and you fell in love with Navy EOD first, and we're totally ready to go do that.
Yeah. Well, at the same time, not only was my job undermanned, but it was a transition period for Navy EOD as well. Back in the day, EOD wasn't even its own rate, like its own MOS.
Right.
It was a qualification, a specialty of suffix. So you had to come from different source jobs, source rates, and bosun's mate, master to arms, not cook.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a few things going against me.
Aaron, let me. I'm going to do another ad read here real quick, and then we jump back into the interview. Again, I'm sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, go for it.
So our sponsor for tonight's show is Augusta Precious Metals. You guys know what helps me sleep well at night? It's physical gold. I know a lot of folks out there are concerned about where the economy is heading right now and that it might take a dip. So I decided to learn more about gold IRAs to help me diversify. Did you know that you can buy gold for your IRA in your 401k? Gold can't be tracked like digital currency. No one has to know what you're buying, and there's no way to print more of it. The best resource for gold IRAs is Augusta Precious Metals. Their track record is no less than phenomenal. They have thousands of happy customers, and they're the absolute best. They're amazing at what they do. Learn why thousands of Americans are getting gold IRAs as part of their retirement portfolios. You need to contact Augusta Precious Metals and get their free guide. So text TEAM to 68592. Again, text TEAM to 68592. TEAM to 68592, or go to AugustaPreciousMetals.com. That's AugustaPreciousMetals.com. So thank you guys for supporting one of the sponsors of tonight's show. So back to you, Aaron. So tell us about how you made that transition then from, you talked a little bit, you took your service record down to the Army recruiters and they were like, hey, good to go.
It wasn't like a smooth transition. I took about half a year off. I left the service entirely. Moved to Brooklyn, New York.
Really?
And went to work. What's that?
We're in Brooklyn.
I was looking for the most affordable. I was almost out by Coney Island by the time I could find a place I could afford. I think Gravesend.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was right on Ocean Avenue and Kings Highway.
Yep.
Right about there. But I was teaching in Lower Manhattan. So I'd take the subway in, and I was working with a buddy of mine teaching computer applications to the corporate setting, like Citigroup and stuff like that. And
Aaron, you're just one of those, like, what do they say, like thespians, like the type of person that can just like do anything.
What's that?
Like the type of person that can just like
a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
Or some people call that. Yeah. So how did you like? He taught you how to use the applications, or you had been using those applications, and then you turn around and where did you?
I had a buddy, and it's not as hard. I mean, I was teaching Excel to all the. It was like I was teaching the city way of formatting stuff that, their new hires, which are all 1,600 SAT scores in the entire room, So I was just teaching them how to put that particular type of blue fade in the background and stuff like that. But The truth is, when I was teaching these things, you get Microsoft Project, Microsoft Office, or anything like that, and somebody hires you to do level 1. You buy the level 1 and the level 2 book, right? And you read it the day before, and it's pretty straightforward. And you just regurgitate level 1. And by the end of the day, when you have a couple minutes left over, or somewhere in the middle of the day, you just throw out a couple pointers from level 2, and they think you know everything. if they hire you for level 1 and level 2, well, you take a couple extra days, and then you buy level 3 book, and you do the same thing.
Right.
So I learned it all on the fly, and it worked out pretty well. The only thing was it wasn't for me, and I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to go EOD, but I was pretty pissed off about not doing it in the Navy. Took that little time off, just not shave and stuff, or not grew out a nice beard. But then I decided I was going to go to that Army recruiter and get back into the fight.
Yeah. So you hadn't been on like the delayed entry program or anything. You were just taking like a personal break, decompressing, and teaching Excel and whatnot.
Yeah, my own personal delayed entry program, I guess.
So
earning enough money to get by in New York. It was actually a pretty cool experience.
Yeah,
definitely a learning experience, but I quickly got claustrophobic. I was used to wide open seas, wide open deserts, wide open country of the Midwest, and even going for a run in Brooklyn, you go a block, stop, go a block, stop.
Right.
Trip over a trash bag or a dog or something. But I went to the Army recruiter, and they welcomed me in. I did do. It was I didn't go to basic training. I did this gentleman's course. It was like what was it? Like a pilot program for prior service. It was so funny. All these guys have been out for at least different service or out of the Army for at least 3 years. And because it's all of the knowledge-based stuff, none of the indoctrination stuff, the dogma. So I got the knowledge I needed to go soldier, and I got the uniform, but I still felt like a sailor at heart. I felt like an infiltrator.
Yeah.
Then after transitioning uniforms, learning some of the lingo, I went to the EOD school, and that was pretty cool. I mean, you train together with all the branches, so we all learn the same language anyways, and we're all it's every branch comes together to teach their EOD techs the exact same knowledge, so that I can be paired up on the battlefield with an Air Force tech, a Navy tech, a Marine tech, and we can all do the job together without skipping a beat. There's no friction, no lag time in understanding each other. We just know how to do the job. And it also is great for actually when we have to do joint operations, and there's no cross branch rivalries or anything like that. No click type things. We're all in the same EOD family, and I love it. It's still large to get today.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about the EOD school? How long was it? I think that for a lot of us who, when we watch EOD stuff, on TV in a movie, if there's an EOD person, they're always trying to defuse a bomb. But really, a lot of times out in the field, you're not defusing, like you're bipping them or whatever. But can you tell us like all the things you learned, how long it was, things like that?
Yeah, I went through. I think each of the branches have their own individual phase one, and the Army's used to be at Redstone Arsenal, Huntsville, Alabama. They moved it to Fort Lee, Virginia. But I went through Redstone, and that's about 10 weeks of really the kindergarten of EOD. And it's stuff like ordnance identification. What does it tell you if it has fins or a pin or a parachute? Different colors. What different colors or markings signify? That kind of thing. Electronics, basic circuitry, physics. The different forces at play if a thing is dropped, fired, thrown, buried. And how the different forces engage and activate the fusing that's on there. And it's all actually very basic stuff to then dig deep into, the hundreds of thousands of different types of munitions that have been made domestically and abroad. And that's, when you get to the joint school run by the Navy on Eglin Air Force Base here in the Panhandle, you start right back from the beginning with electronics and basic physics, but you got a primer at your phase one school. And then we're all trained together, and you can't take any of the material out of the school. So you train, you study all day long, you learn all day long. There's about an hour or so mandatory study hall right after, and then you got to leave it all at the school till the next day. There's an exam or a practical test on average every 2 to 3 days.
Wow.
And the attrition rate in that school is pretty high, just knowledge based. There's definitely a physical component to it. You got to be able to physically fit enough to wear that bomb suit. And of course, you got to go through the bomb suit test just to get into the school. And it's like a PT test in the bomb suit, of course. But then the real test comes when they start asking you basic cognition questions to see if while you're smoked, you can actually think. And you still maintain your basic critical thinking skills. And that's really what the test is about. That you never quit, and you can keep your head on while you're huffing and puffing. And then it's about basic PT maintenance while you get your skull crammed full of knowledge on everything that goes boom, from bullets to weapons of mass destruction and nukes.
That's amazing. Do you recall how much that bomb suit weighs?
Sorry?
Do you recall how much the bomb suit weighs?
There are different models.
Okay.
And the latest model, I think, is around 90 pounds with the helmet.
Yikes. Yeah.
That's something else, because it's not just 90 pounds that like you're carrying like on your back in a focused place. Like you have to be able to lift your legs under the pressure of the suit.
Right. Does it feel like you're trying to, render safe bombs like while you're underwater at that point?
Kinda. I don't know. The first few times was definitely very, very alien, very foreign, being in this thing. And over time, though, practice, you just don't think about it. It's bomb suit time, right? You get on, the transition is pretty fast when you consider that what's in front of you is could possibly explode and kill you. You don't think much about the bomb suit at all. You just put it on, you adapt.
And at this phase, when you went through EOD school, what stage were like the robotics at that point, as far as using the robots and the Johnny 5 model to go out there and defuse some of these things?
Yeah, I went through in 08, and this was just a few. I mean, Iraq. You got to consider, where we were in that timeline of Iraq and Afghanistan, and how slow, the TRADOC and the other training branches of the military are to really catch up to the battlefield. And we weren't too bad about it, but all the same, remember, ordnance is our bread and butter. It's in our name. And IEDs was actually still relatively new, though it was all over the both battlefields, mostly Iraq at the time. But we didn't have, actually, IEDs was only about 2 weeks of the 43 we were at Eglin Air Force Base. And that's for everything. There's really not a whole lot to teach when it comes to IEDs if you already know basic circuitry from the early stages. Because the thing about, I mean, there's of course lots to know about IEDs, switches and fusing, but the thing is about IEDs is that there's it's made up of anything and everything. And the limits to how you can make an IED is the only limit is the bomb maker's creativity. So how do you really teach a class on that except basic, the basics? So we learn a few of the most popular switches, that kind of thing. We do remote render safe procedures or disruption procedures. We learn different tools to engage these different IEDs. And robots wasn't really that important. In fact, everybody at the schoolhouse knew that they'd get plenty of robot time once they got to their units. So maybe a few days out of that week, they would play, to let the students go out there and play with the robots.
And like you said, the course was 43 weeks long, but that's to teach the basics.
Yeah. The basic laws of science, physics, electronics, chemical analysis, that kind of thing. We would have a few weeks of, because everything's broken up into different divisions, from biochemical to weapons of mass destruction, nuclear. Air is one of the most dreaded divisions in the school, and that's everything. That's everything that could be inside an aircraft or dropped from its wings or the chaff flares, everything that has an explosive on an aircraft. And think about it, inside a cockpit, everything explodes, from even from the rockets under their seats. The canopy explodes before they even let the pilot eject. Even their harnesses have explosives in them that activated by salt water.
For the ink that goes out?
think about
The water wings too, probably. We
think about-
were just saying that when you're talking about as far as the explosives in the harness, Dave was saying, does that deploy like an ink so that they can be spotted, or is that for their like water wings, like the life preserver?
That's to release them if they go unconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and even the ejection handle that like starts all of the other stuff, that's like a little shotgun shell that it's like a primer that sets it all off. So imagine you're a student maybe halfway through the EOD school and you face this thing that looks like a great big explosive cactus, that you're about to go hug. And everything is remember your safeties, right? We have, I think it's 26 different safeties that we have to remember. And on a test, forgetting one of the safeties, each one of these tests, the minimum passing grade is an 85, because you don't want to see student in a bomb suit. And
It's like a parachute ringer. Like, we're not sure if we're taking a C on this.
Yeah, and any safety infractions it's an automatic 16-point hit.
Wow.
So when you come up to an aircraft and you've got to render safe maybe the ejection seat because it had a quote unquote hard landing, you've got to pass everything that's mounted under the wing of the aircraft and say, I'm recognizing heat, shock, friction, eject, laser, EMR, static, anything that might set that thing off for every single piece of ordnance. And you can't miss any of them, because each one of those safeties on each one of those pieces of ordnance is a 16-point hit.
Wow.
And sometimes to render safe, say the like the GAU 8 Alpha, the gun on the A10, to render safe that thing is just sticking like a cotter pin in a piece of the mechanics to render to safe the weapon, right? But you got to get past all that ordnance to get there. And it was it's a pretty harrowing experience. It's pretty nerve-wracking. That's how you get.
Did you also get some extra love in the MOP 4 protective suit during that course?
Well, that's in the IEDs. The division part of that is the bomb suit test. And other than that, though, you don't put on a bomb suit for a known hazard. If you know what the hazard is, and you probably don't need the bomb suit. Imagine anytime you're on deployment and you're on like dismounted patrol, like EOD decks aren't going to carry that thing around until maybe they need it.
Right.
So bomb suits are a tool for certain situations, certain places and time. But once you train how to use it and when to know when you need it, then you move on to the next division.
Aaron, you're talking a lot about render safe, which I think is, it's what we normally think of when we think of EOD, right? Finding something in a populated area or like you say, with the aircraft. With Afghanistan, Iraq, obviously we move on to this model of disposal, actually, like not rendering it, but like blowing it or whatever. Did you guys cover much about demolitions itself? Did you guys learn how to place charges? A lot. Obviously, you were already covering explosive theory, but were you getting the hands-on practical, like a demolitions, training in that also?
Absolutely, of course.
Okay.
In fact, a majority of our job is using explosives as a tool. So, and I'm not just saying slap a couple blocks of C4 and make something to go away. BIP, blow in place.
Right.
And, making something go boom is sexy for the cameras. And of course, we like blowing stuff up.
Right.
But we also have explosive tools that, I mean, no kidding, we have tools. We can shoot a bomb with a bullet to make it safer. And that blew my mind the first time I heard about that. But we're using, specific charges to shear or cut or impinge a piece of the fusing, or to cause it to low order rather than high order, to blow small rather than big, or to burn instead of explode. And yeah, we're like surgeons when it comes to explosives. Now, of course, there's plenty of times when we've had to dispose of just huge caches of ordnance. And a lot of times they don't really have fusing, so there's no reason to render them safe. They're already safe. They're just piles of explosives. We have to make them go away. And we have specific procedures for where and how to place the shots and tie it all in with det cord and prime it and all of that. And it's all essential to making sure that it's done safely, and you don't have to go back and do it a second time to clean up. I have had to go back on botched shots to go pick up blocks of C4 that were punted into the battle space, just sitting there for the enemy to pick up. Or, something went boom, and like maybe somebody was trying to bring down a mud hut, and instead all they did was brought down part of a mud hut on top of a whole bunch of unexploded blocks of C4. And then what do? Somebody else, the Army is not going to sit around forever as you pull brick by brick, but guess who wouldn't mind digging through the mess to get at that explosive? So yeah, it's to be safe, not just in the immediate future, like on the shot, but it's to be safe, to make sure we're not leaving anything behind for the enemy.
So it almost sounds as though you're saying 18 Charlies were the bane of your existence.
Oh, we're jumping a few steps here, but
I wasn't gonna say anything. Crabs over castles.
P for plenty. It doesn't always work. Is that what you're saying?
I wasn't going to talk about the sappers at all, but whoops.
That's hilarious. So, was there any part of this 43-week course that you were just like blown away by, that you're like, this is the coolest thing ever?
Sorry, say that again.
Was there any part of the EOD course that you were just absolutely blown away by, where you're thinking, like, this is the coolest thing ever? I never imagined I would see something like this.
I don't know. I mean, I was so amped. I was so excited about the whole thing.
Yeah.
I was actually having a really good time. It was hard. It was a challenge. And it was really what I was looking for, and I was around all these other people that were like alpha type nerds, that were competitive, smart, wanted to take charge. And yeah, I was in this, it's just an amazing crowd of people to be, these warriors learning this amazing skill. So any one particular thing, I don't know. It's hard to pick one out.
That's awesome.
And so after you graduate from the course, tell us about, landing in your unit, and what that was like, and when, you came down on deployment orders, sort of what the next stage was for you.
After I graduated from EOD school, I went to Fort Drum, upstate New York, and I immediately put in a company that was on the road to war. And 2009, 2010-ish is when my company went to Iraq. I was a new EOD tech, but I kept my rank from the Navy. So I went from petty officer second class to sergeant. And that was tough because as an NCO, I was expected to get my team leader certification. And the team leader is the guy that actually gets in the bomb suit, makes that long walk. He's the most experienced, the highest ranking guy on an EOD team. And some of these privates had come up through EOD from the beginning and had far more badge experience than I did, having been a cook for my entire military career. Mm-hmm. So, there was a little resentment, but everybody understood. I had to work twice as hard to get up to speed. I was placed as a fourth man on a three-man team when I went to Iraq, and it's kind of like tits on a bar. I was a team sergeant that didn't need a sergeant, but I was there. I was learning. My team leader, the other sergeant on the team, was teaching me as much as he could, as fast as I could take it in. And I think my first sergeant recognized what was going on. So he pulled me from the team and he sent me to Camp Victory or Liberty, whatever. It went, right by Bayap and Baghdad. And I went to the higher level, the counter-explosives exploitation cell at Task Force Troy. And that's the Joint IED operations cell. That's where they take all of the evidence collected from the teams off the battlefield, and they triage it and they examine it. So, but they put me right in the triage, the receiving area, and I would take these boxes of evidence kits, baggies and boxes of tape and pressure plates and batteries and det cord and samples of all sorts of stuff, and I would better package it for the next steps. Triage is really like, if you think of role 1, 2, 3 in the first aid on a battlefield, we just cleaned up the evidence samples and then send them off to the different departments, like chemical analysis, biometrics, electronics, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And from there, that and the storyboards would go to ATF, FBI, DEA, DIA, and so on. So I got to learn exactly how they wanted to see the evidence presented from the front. So when I actually did get my team leader certification and had my own team, I knew what the best way to present the evidence so that we could more quickly, more effectively get to the left of the bang. If you consider the timeline, from explosion backwards, you got the bomb placer, the bomb maker, the bomb financer, all those guys. And that's really what it was all about. We want to get there before they get to bury it. So it was an incredible learning experience and really handy when I finally did get my own team in 2011. I'd earned my team leader certification and was heading back to Afghanistan for my third deployment. Second time as an EOD tech, and second time in Afghanistan, but first as an EOD team leader. I went to, we were placed in support of the 4-4 Cav Scouts out of Riley. and it was really busy. We're a little west of Kandahar, in a little town called Siachoy. And I asked a Terp what that meant. And he goes, I think it means cemetery. And it really did. It felt like I was in Tombstone. I mean, there was just IEDs everywhere. I remember hearing one guy say, when we got there, it's like, around here, every step is a decision. And
Was this far?
Every step is deliberate.
Was this far enough along in the war? It's not just roadside IEDs, but it's also like as you approach a target, it's along trails. It became like increasingly intense, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And we had all the crew systems and the armored trucks, and then of course we have to leave them all behind because everything's on dirt trails. So we have these metal detectors, and those guys, the privates that get the metal detectors and go point. I got to hand it to those guys. Those guys have some balls. They earn their chops, and that was amazing what they did. They had some spidey sense sometimes, and they were awesome. I would try my best to educate and inform this component that I was supporting. My team was supporting while we were inside the wire the best I could. Any of those red sheets with the new intel that came out for the area, I'd get that out. Anything we were seeing as a trend, maybe bomb makers, migration type patterns, anything like that, I wanted to train them up the best I could and get them all the information they could. And even if it wasn't new information, I would just teach them some of the skills of what to do if we weren't around, or how to handle certain munitions in certain situations. I didn't want to give them license to do EOD procedures, but we can't be everywhere at once. And if there's a dire situation, I want to make sure they were prepared.
What were some of the ways that EOD, the texts, were being used? Because I know that a lot of times you guys were doing route clearance where you were ahead of an active patrol, vehicular patrol. Were you also embedded in the line squads as they would go out? Like, what were the different ways you guys were being utilized?
We did quite a bit of each. We would go out. In fact, where we were most of that time, we were actually the Cav Scouts were building up command outposts all over the place, almost within visual distance of each other, to deny the enemy any area, any terrain. So we would walk behind the we had that was hilarious. We had the Puerto Rican National Guard engineers, driving the D2 dozers, just cutting a road right through grape rows and poppy fields and marijuana fields, just digging a road straight through, and we'd walk right behind them. And then they would cut a 250 meter by 250 meter square. And then we would set up our cots or whatever we just lay out there. And eventually HESCO barriers would go up around us. And the whole time we just, in fact, a lot of that time, the dozers did half the work for us. They would just turn up the soil, and there'd be all vegetable oil jugs just sitting there in the open. And usually they kicked them around so much that they were already separated. We just had to place a charge on them and detonate them. So that was great. But then, of course, with all these dirt roads cut, there was a lot of soft soil left. And, that Afghan dirt, it's got 3 different forms. It's got the hard packed concrete like dirt. When it rains, it turns into that slick snot that just walking from your hooch to the chow hall, you get 6 inches taller. And then it's got that baby powder moon dust. It's so easy to just, all you have to do is drop an IED and the dust cloud will settle right back down on it and bury it. So that was what was happening. And the route clearance packages were losing a truck on average every other day.
Wow.
So the mechanics were busy. We were busy doing post-blast analysis. Most of the time, it was just a post-blast analysis on a vehicle, thankfully. Sometimes it wasn't. So that's what we do. We were cleaning up all the IEDs in the area, and if we didn't get to the IED left of the bang, well, we'd do our best to analyze right at the bang.
So can you, for people who, I mean, this is fascinating to me, but for people who don't have any idea of like how EOD operates, like, so you go out there and one of the guys on point sees something suspicious. How do you proceed from there?
Well, of course, we'll come up on whomever is the closest, on the scene. We'll make sure that everybody knows they keep good distance from any suspect item, and then we'll ask them all the information we can, whether it's some local or if it's somebody in our element. We'll ask them as much information as we can. We'll have them point it out from where we're standing if it's not too close, and we'll get as much information as we possibly can. Then we'll make sure that everybody's in a safe standoff distance and setting a cordon around the area, making sure that we don't get any surprises while I'm focused in on the suspect item and everybody else's eyes are facing out. And then my team and I will just get to work. If we do find that it's an IED, and here's the thing, if it's an unknown hazard, our number one approach, our first approach was always either a bomb suit or a robot. And since most of the time we're on, foot patrols, dismounted patrols, a lot of our guys would be carrying one of those man-portable robots. So we send the robot down. More often than not, it would turn a little corner of one of those 3-foot thick, mud huts, and that'd be the end of the robot. Just no signal whatsoever. But that technology got a lot better. But then it was it was me doing a IED, me walking down on the IED and also rescuing a robot. But then it was doing whatever remote procedures I could possibly do. If it was separating almost everything, I mean, I'm talking like 98% of the stuff we ran on that deployment, it was an oil jug with homemade explosive, a 9-volt battery, pressure plate with just particle board or plywood, and then it all connected with lamp cord. Super simple, super low tech, and really hard to detect except for the 9-volt battery because there's almost no metal there. Mm-hmm. So, and the Taliban, the insurgents, they didn't know this magic wand we swung, what the magic was that found all of their IEDs, but somehow they learned that we were finding the batteries. They didn't know why, but what they learned how to do was they did a little standoff. They would fair lead the battery, so they'd get a little more lamp cord and run the battery around the corner. Mm-hmm. So, or it just run it off the side of the trail, and right in the middle of the trail was the IED. Mm-hmm. So there's almost no metal. And that was what was getting a lot of us. Thank goodness, maybe after, say, 24 hours, the dirt would start to settle and it would start to get concave a little bit. So it began to show telltale signs of something to be buried there. And then there'd be this little concave ant trail going off the side of the road. But sometimes it was just fresher than that.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to find.
I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they started doing that with their cell phone switches too. That once they learned about the jammers, they started experimenting to find out how far out of like the jammer's range the cell phone needed to be, and then it would connect the circuit back into the explosive that was within the range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, in Iraq, especially, they were far more sophisticated with their IEDs. I think I might have run one electronically controlled device in Afghanistan that whole deployment. Granted, I only got to spend 8 months of the 12 months there, but I wasn't going to find too many electronic devices.
Yeah.
Even in my last few months.
Yeah.
But some knuckleheads, because I told you they don't know the magic we were using to find those batteries, so they would connect the same kind of circuit to whatever the explosives they would find. Most of the time, it was the oil jug with homemade explosives. Sometimes it was one time, it was a pair of 80 millimeter Chinese mortars, which are encased in iron. So it was buried right in the middle of the goat trail, this dirt trail with a pressure plate right on top. But it was pinging off the metal detector like crazy. And I'm like, what's going on here? And I could still see the ant trail leading off to the battery around the corner. I'm like, you guys, come on.
Yeah. So
sometimes we didn't find them until, with our metal detectors. And so a lot of times people found it with their feet.
Find them with the what? Oh, with the feet.
Yeah, like I did 8 months into it.
Yeah.
Do you want to, if it's okay with you telling us about that incident and how that went down?
Of course. It was about eight and a half months into the deployment, and we were starting to see the end of the road with this deployment. Most of the guys had gone on their that 2 weeks of R&R, and I let my whole team and most of the company go before me. I waited till the end, one of the last guys in the company, to go do my 2 weeks of R&R because it was Thanksgiving and my firstborn's first birthday. I only had a few weeks with him before I deployed, and I got to go home, see him turn 1, got to see the whole family for Thanksgiving, gathered around the table. It was a pretty fantastic, I call it my last page in the photo album. And then I got back on the battlefield. My team picked me up in our armored truck from Kandahar, and we jumped in a supply convoy to head back out to Sia Choi. And we weren't on duty or anything. I hadn't even reported back to the COP command outpost, but we were there. We were in the convoy, and there was something found on the side of the road. So we set up that cordon. They asked me to get to work, and of course, why wait for QRF when I'm right here? That would be a dick move. This ain't my AO. But I threw the luggage off of the robot out of the truck. It got to work. It found a pressure plate with a jug, and it pulled the pressure plate away and separated the components, so it was essentially rendered safe. But it couldn't get the jug out of the hard-packed dirt. And I wanted my evidence. If I could do it safely, then that's what I would do. So I grabbed my evidence kit and my metal detector, and I jumped out of the truck and I started making my way towards it. No bomb suit, because it's a known hazard. It was rendered safe. There's no sense in getting in the bomb suit. And I'm not going to suit up for every unknown hazard that might be out there. That would be silly. But about 20 or 30 meters from the original device, there just happened to be a secondary device that hadn't been detected until my metal detector was trying to tell me something really important. And that's when I got punted. The lights went out. I got kicked into the air, landed on my knees and elbows. I was still conscious. I couldn't see anything. It seriously rung my bell. I mean, like a gong was going off in my head. And I thought that my helmet had gotten pushed over my face. That's why I couldn't see. And the first thing I did was wiggle the fingers and toes and knees and elbows and make sure everything was where I left it. And well, it was, more or less. I could taste like explosive and dirt, and maybe I was crunching on my own teeth. I don't know. It tasted like crap, but I was more or less intact, except I just got to, move my helmet back in place and get back in the fight.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to grab my helmet to find that it was gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's when I thought, shit, a first sergeant's going to kill me for losing that thing. But the stuff that goes through your head, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Actually, somebody asked me, what's the first thing that went through your head when that explosion happened? I said, overpressure. But I did realize at that moment that something was really wrong. I'd taken some damage. I knew that the first thing that's going to happen, because the training still kicked in. I don't know how lucid I was, but I was thinking, okay, complex ambush. Are they going to start taking pot shots? Are they going to start attacking with small arms? Is everybody in that security cordon now looking directly inside at me? Is in my team, they know what they're supposed to do when a team leader gets injured. They're going to clear a safe path for the medics to come get me out. And I decided I didn't want my team in a potentially hazardous situation. So I stood up and I started making my way back towards the truck. Only problem is I couldn't see. I had no idea where that damn truck was anymore. So I'm just doing this zombie walk across the battlefield, probably making it worse for my team to get me. But they grabbed me, dragged me back to safety, and the medic comes running up, huffing and puffing because he's coming from like 300 meters away. And the first thing he does is complain about making him run. I'm like, sorry to ruin your day, dude. But that's warriors, joking with each other. At the same time, I asked my team, like, how's my face? And somebody said, well, you're not going to do any modeling when you get out. But the medevac chopper. Remember, we were just out of Kandahar, so medevac came in 14 minutes, and within 48 hours, I was in Walter Reed, Bethesda, Maryland. It's in the hospital bed.
And was that about the time that you realized, what the extent of your injuries were?
It was kind of a whirlwind.
Mm-hmm.
I was, of course, I received TBI. I would have made it back to the States even faster, but they held me for 24 hours in Landstuhl just to let the swelling go down so I could do the cross-Atlantic flight. But it was hoses and tubes and nurses, doctors, admin staff and paperwork. And thankfully, I was glad to have an excuse not to write anything because I couldn't see. Mm-hmm. People coming and going, and of course, are on the Beltway, and there's like elected officials and dignitaries, all veteran service organizations, people coming and going. And also, I learned something new, that when you have 100% blindness, you get the added bonus of a sleep disorder because you can't reset your circadian rhythm to sunlight. So I was wide awake every night, trying to figure out why I wasn't sleeping, and zombie during the day, just hoping somebody would like lock my door and leave me alone so I could fall asleep.
Yeah.
But eventually, I started thinking about my situation and the fact that, the doctors tried to save one of my eyes. The blast had completely taken one of my eyes, my right eye, and actually fused my eyelids together. So I had this like permanent wink and a gun thing going on. But the blast, there was a piece of frag that cut right across the bridge of my nose and gashed the other eyeball. They tried to save it, but it was a no-go. So the blast had also blown out both my eardrums, though I could still hear. It was just less. And the blast had also cracked my skull, so I was leaking spinal fluid right through my sinuses and out my nose. They did what they could for the burns and the scrapes in my eyes. They took a piece of my septum and patched the cracks in my skull, though we'd find out a couple of years later that it was never completely patched. But that's all they could really do. And I would have to learn how to be a blind guy for the rest of my life. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
After checking out of Walter Reed, maybe 4 or 5 weeks later, they sent me to Tampa, to the VA hospital there, just for some scans and TBI. I had mild to moderate TBI. But then it was to the VA hospital in Augusta, Georgia, where they've got one of the blind rehabilitation units in the VA. The VA's got, I think, 14 of them around the country. And that's where I'd spend about 6 months learning how to use my accessibility tools, like talking computer and text-to-speech software on my phone and barcode scanner for the, anything in the pantry. And of course, that white cane, the long cane for navigating. And you'd be surprised. Things like learning how to pair your socks, and how to gauge how much toothpaste to put on your brush. The thing was, when I was still sitting at the hospital bed in Walter Reed, and I was pissed, man. These low-tech caveman, I was so mad that they got me with that thing. We've been so highly trained. We're the best fighting force on the planet in history. And this. And I was mad at I was mad at the Army for some reason. I was mad at the president. I was mad at everybody. I don't know why. I was mad at some people, but they deserved it. I don't know why.
Right.
It's natural, though.
I was mostly mad at myself.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was always asking those questions, right? The why me's, the what ifs. What if I'd done it differently? Taken a different route approaching the IED? What if I'd sent the robot out again? What if and why me? Why did this happen I wasn't even supposed to run that incident.
Right.
I was supposed to just had all these questions. Why is this happening to me?
Right.
Why my eyes? Why didn't they just take a leg or something? I mean, it was buried on the ground. Why didn't he? I was virtually untouched from my neck down. Almost not a scrape. I don't even know how that happened. But why? And nobody can answer. I couldn't answer any of those questions. They're impossible to answer. And it just leads to that downward spiral.
Right.
So
Right.
I had to change my questions. And it was, thank goodness, my family, the military training, all that resilience training, the welcome to the suck in Afghanistan, embrace the suck type of mentality. You're here, so you better do your best at it, right?
Right.
And I'm there in Walter Reed, and I'm not the only one in that hospital that's injured. There were a whole bunch of Joes and Janes in there that were all fighting their own battles. These warriors weren't quitting. Who was I to say that I had my, monopoly on pain or shitty days, right? So do I really have a good excuse to quit? And what am I going to do other than just sit here? I better get to work and get busy doing something. If I'm, not going to allow myself to just piss and moan all day. So I decided if I was going to be blind, I was going to be the best damn blind guy I could be.
Was there? I'm sorry. I just curious. Was this all with the anger and the non-beneficial questions that you were asking yourself? Was there a particular moment or reason that you sort of turned around?
I'd say it was incremental, but there was definitely, it was definitely a one moment. I loved it. It really paints a great picture. And I didn't mention this, but when I was home on R&R, just 2 weeks before, I was visiting family in the DC area, and I'd gotten word that another team leader in my company, a friend of mine, Kyle Vickers, had gotten injured. And we were right there. So I hurried over to Walter Reed. We got right to the unit, and we get to the nurse's station, found out that he hadn't even gotten out of ICU yet. So we're the first ones there that knew him. And of course, they wouldn't tell us anything about his injuries, confidentiality. But they said, one of the nurses said, well, you can go wait in his room. He should be out any minute now. So I went to his room and saw his bed was just waiting for him. And right beside his bed was a pile of clothes. And, one of those veterans organizations, the nonprofits come with, shorts, sweats, T-shirts. And then on top of this neatly folded pile was one shoe. Okay. Don't have to be a rocket scientist. Right. So then Kyle gets wheeled in, and there he is in the gurney. Under the sheet, you can definitely tell there's only one leg. And he sees me, and he's got a terrific personality, but I think it was assisted by the anesthesia. You see this huge smile as he goes, "Hale, dude, what are you doing here?" It must have been a surprise because last time he saw me, I was in Afghanistan with him. He kind of looks at me conspiratorially and whispers, like, "Man, I think I kicked myself in the face." And the worst thing you could say about it that day was that it ruined a terrible calf tattoo. Two weeks later, I'm right down the hallway from him.
Jeez.
And I'm in a really, really bad mood.
Yeah.
Kyle comes wheeling into my room one day, maybe 2 or 3 days after I've been there, I arrive. And he goes, "Hale, man, give me your hand. You got to feel this." I'm like, okay, I'm not playing that game. I don't know what's going on here, but I am way too suspicious.
Right.
You guys know.
Right. Next comes the homo joke, right?
Touch this, right? So he grabs my wrist, he puts it up under his chin, and I feel this, stubble. He's like, 2 weeks of growth, my man. Apparently. It is another one of those conspiratorial things, right? And I can hear him smiling as he's like, the Marine EOD techs, they've got this liaison guy here at Walter Reed. So when they get out of surgery, the first thing the guy asks is, "How are you feeling?" If the Marine says he's feeling fine, which every Marine's supposed to, the liaison guy, hands him a razor and says, "Great, get back into rigs." We don't have that liaison in the Army. So grow your beard out. It's driving the Marine techs crazy. And I couldn't help it. I had to crack a smile. I'm sitting there going that downward, spiral of defeat. And it was me beating myself down. And thankfully, Kyle pulled me out of it. But, he's here. He's going to have one leg for the rest of his life. He's going to have to deal with that. And I learned about his incident later. And that's a whole other story. But he was here cracking jokes and playing games with the Marine EOD techs. And he was making the best of it. And I had to snap out of it. I had to get on his level, or at least come close to it. And I had to get busy instead of just sitting there moping. Thank goodness for him and those other warriors, because that was definitely a tough time.
Yeah.
What form did that take for you, as far as getting busy? Throwing yourself at something, and of course learning to live with these injuries or live around them in a sense, right? How did that sort of how did that progress take place for you?
Well, frankly, there wasn't really much for me to do at Walter Reed except, sitting in the hospital bed and get healthier. Eventually, like I said, I was just hit in the head. And thankfully, we Hale boys are really thick-skulled. It was the perfect place to hit me. But I was perfectly ambulatory. I could get up. I could walk around. They gave me a cane. I really didn't know how to use it. It was mostly just a sign for other people to let them know I wasn't getting out of their way.
Right.
But I had my family in town. My mom from Ohio, my dad from California. My aunt actually is in the DC area, so I would check out in the afternoon from the hospital when the staff, when the regular doctor staff left, and I would go have dinner at my aunt's house with my family, or we'd go out to eat, stuff like that. Oh man, I went to a Dave & Buster's. That was a mistake. Oh man, blind and
overwhelming,
like right off the battlefield, and all those arcade sounds. It's like I have to leave. But other than that, it was just about. They really couldn't do much for me. They were leading the way in prosthetics, but I didn't need any.
Right.
So as soon as I was healthy enough to leave the hospital, I went to Augusta and I started learning what I could learn. And that was, I just threw myself into this whole learning how to be blind. And as soon as I got like my iPhone with the voiceover, the text-to-speech software, and I learned how to search things on the internet, man, I was pumping blind keyword in, plus outdoors, plus hiking, climbing, running, whatever, and trying to figure out how, because I'm not the first blind guy in the world, how do people live? How do people do things? And there was a couple names that kept popping up. One was Eric Weinmeier. He is the first blind person to climb Mount Everest. I thought, damn, if he can do that, I could climb a mountain. So I looked him up, and I went mountain climbing with him. And there's a guy named Lonnie Bedwell, another Navy guy. So he didn't go blind in the service. He was turkey hunting, and says his buddy Dick Cheney'd him. But Lonnie's the first blind person to kayak the entire Grand Canyon. So I looked him up, and I went kayaking with him. We did sections of Yellowstone. It was amazing. And you know what? I mean, I was fighting. There was the Army Ranger Ivan Castro. It was right at Bragg's Special Operations Recruiting Branch. He stayed on active duty, like Captain Scott Smiley. The active duty blind guys, they were working more administrative roles, but they kept the uniform on. And I gave Ivan a call one day, and that was hilarious. He is a way of turning all conversations into the Ivan show, but he's a great guy. He said he made it a point every year to run the Air Force Marathon, the Army 10 miler, and the Marine Corps Marathon. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a great idea. So I registered for all three of those. And then I got talked into, by this time, I'd moved to Eglin Air Force Base. They asked me if I would, where I wanted to retire. And I said, I don't. And I asked them to send me to the EOD school. I'd start instructing. So as I was learning, I was instructing, I registered for those three races. I registered for the Pensacola Marathon, something local. And I got talked into the San Antonio Marathon. I don't even know how. But before, I registered 4 marathons and the Army 10 miler, all within the span of 4 months. And I'd never run anything longer than a 10K in my life. So more learning I'd have to do. I ran them, and 3 of those races qualified me for Boston.
Wow. What can I ask? What is the process for running 100 yards, let alone a marathon, when you're blind and you can't see the route?
Oh yeah, you gotta listen really hard for the traffic. No. At a marathon, I would just start yelling Marco. Let's see what happens. Actually, the truth is, there's a couple different methods, but what I started using was just a simple short tether. I would hold one end, and my guide would hold another. In fact, my very first tether was a dog tug-of-war rope. I'd hold a fat knot, and my guide would hold a knot. And I almost wouldn't have to talk. I would get all my cues from wherever that rope went.
Yeah.
And there was a couple different signals for like high stepping it, or if we had to go single file. And then of course it was incumbent upon my guide to just work around any like open manhole covers or something. But that's how I ran for 9 years. I've been running marathons and then ultra marathons with a sighted guide or guides side by side.
That's hardcore, man.
Actually, it was just a side effect of trying to get ready for the mountains. It's really hard to find a decent mountain to train on in Florida. But I would pack a ruck, one of those expedition packs, and go find the tallest condo building and go up and down the stairs. And then I'd find a guide and go for a run and train for these marathons. And that's how besides kettlebells and stuff like that, it turned my garage into a pretty decent gym. It was running just happened to be a lot easier than getting to the condos or getting to an actual mountain. And it was a great way to socialize. I mean, everything nowadays is a team sport. So I love getting out and running with locals. And a lot of times I run with first-time guides. They're like, how do you do this sighted guide thing? Yeah, it's no big deal. Hold this.
Yeah.
And then I've got somebody trapped as I can talk to them. But
right.
Well, it sounds like you were probably dragging the guide after a little while.
Well, that is one of the challenges, beyond, of course, the obvious, is also finding somebody that could do the same distance or pace that I was doing, and our schedules match up.
Right.
So it's somewhat of complexity.
Yeah.
I would love to mention here that one of my friends, a blind Marine runner, who started a site, a website. It's called unitedinstride.org. And that's where interested people, sighted people, can go and find blind runners around the country, I think even around the world. And, they might be in their neighborhood and go running with them. But I actually, at the time, reached out to Team RWB and found the local chapter, went running with them. This was really cool. They started a Sunday marathon training run specifically to help me get ready for my first marathons. But they invited everybody who wanted to come out of all ability levels, and they had like a paced vehicle loaded with the refreshments and stuff. And more people every week, every Sunday will come out and would come and run. And before long, it wasn't Aaron's marathon training day. It was just training day. And as far as I know, it's still going. And it was great to be a part of something that grew beyond yourself, grew beyond me. It was helping others. Somebody, I know more than one person in that group was just getting ready for their first 5K. And that's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really special.
I also want to touch on, you mentioned that you were allowed to stay in the Army and instruct, which is really cool. And I'm really glad that they're doing that. The Army has gotten better about that over the years. Can you talk a little bit more about what that was like?
Well, I started, they asked me at first, right at Walter Reed, where do you want to retire? And I learned in that time that there's something called a continuation of active duty service, or COAD for short. And you still have to go through the med board process. And that's 9 months, a year long, as they go through. There's this huge review process. But once the Department of Army, Department of Defense have their findings, that's what they send over to the Department of Veterans Affairs as a recommendation for retirement, and like a transfer from one department to the other. And that's when you can put in your request for a COAD. So in the meantime, I can't just stay inpatient at Augusta, a graduated blind school. And then as soon as you get to the health point where the military can't do anything to improve your situation, I guess it is, that's when the med board process begins. So I asked him to send me to the EOD school. Now, of course, the military does have these warrior transition units. The Army, at least, did this, and it's like full units comprised of wounded service members, wounded soldiers that their full-time occupation, their full-time job, it becomes getting well, completing that med board process. So if they have ongoing treatments, that's the first priority. Then it's completing everything they can for the med board process, and if they're everything along that ends, then they're actually ordered to get an education while they're waiting for the board findings to be completed. Well, I asked to go to work, go to the EOD school, and it was funny. I didn't realize what kind of red tape it would take they would send me to the closest warrior transition unit, and then my place of duty and place of work is the red tape in all of that being sent to a Navy base or a Navy school on an Air Force base in the Army warrior transition unit. And so it got so confusing that nobody knew who I belonged to, which is also cool. Yeah, I went to the schoolhouse. I started teaching. I actually went to the IEDs. What I did was I helped build up an out of cycle training course. In a lot of military schools, there's cycles, the classes and a pace that the classes go through. And if somebody, fails a test or has some kind of a medical thing and they miss too much of their class, they can't continue on with that class. They can't miss that material, or they maybe because they failed it, they have to retake that material. They have to go out of cycle and wait till there's a spot opening in another class behind them to retake that particular part of the course and continue on. Sometimes that's days, maybe it's weeks or even months. But when they're out of cycle, our EOD detachment, the Army detachment there, the EOD school, didn't have a whole lot for them to do. They would put them on these, working parties, filling sandbags or doing base cleanup or something. Have you ever read Trident? Jason Redman, when he's at Ranger School, and one day he's picking up cigarette butts.
Right.
We've got EOD techs with nothing to do.
Right.
So back in the detachment, in the backyard, we built this huge sandbox, a training pit, and started training the outer cycle guys wherever they were supposed to jump back into the class. That's what we teach them and keep them sharp on the material that they're about to go back into. And I kept them sharp on the IED stuff. And I did that for about a year and a half or so.
Wow.
And until the med board came back, of course, findings that I guess blindness means I'm allowed to leave the military. In fact, you're not even allowed to be colorblind and do EOD work. So at that same time, I was running this. I was taking time off. I was running these marathons. I was climbing mountains. I was being asked to speak around the country, and I was actually finding enjoyment in sharing the story and finding these other accomplishments, these other challenges. And when I was sitting at the hospital bed, Walter Reed, I might have been definitely was in a bit of denial. Like I didn't want to let go. I could still do this. I could still do something. I could still serve. I don't have to let go of the uniform. But by the time the med board came back with the findings, the decision, I had nothing left to prove, especially not to myself. Mm-hmm. So I retired.
It's truly fascinating. In your relations in the blind community, what are some of the biggest difference you find between men such as yourself, especially the veterans who as adults, became blind, and then people who have been blind either since early childhood or their whole lives? Like, what are some of the differences there that you found?
Some of the different understandings?
I guess because there's sort of really two different sets of the subsets of the blind community, correct? Like people who were sighted for a long time, and then became blind, and people who have never.
Those misconceptions.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is we don't touch other people's faces. That's gross. I don't want to touch your face, and you have no idea where my hands have been. These are my eyes. Remember,
right?
And if you ever see a blind guy at a buffet, just walk out. just go. I'm going to be it'll be me at the buffet, and I'll be just sticking my finger in there. Yeah. But yeah, there were so many misconceptions, so many things I didn't realize blind people could do. For example, while in Augusta and learning how to be blind, there was this. I actually never knew this was even existed, but there was a recreational therapist on staff, and this guy, his whole job was to have fun, basically, recreation. So he would come into my room and say, "Hey, Aaron, you want to go golfing?" I'm like, "Come on, dude."
Like he's messing with you, yeah.
You know what's the funny thing is, like, even when after you go blind, golfers are serious about golfing. You know how they get,
really,
right? Even after they go blind. I mean, there are two national associations: the U.S. Blind Golf Association and the American Blind Golf Association. Apparently, one faction split off from the other because of difference in like the rules, like an argument of the rules. Look, these are blind guys that take golf seriously, and so. Then this rec therapist came in the room another day, and he goes, "Hey, Aaron, you want to go for a bike ride?" I'm like, "Come on, quit messing with me, dude. That's nuts. Bike ride?" And apparently, blind tandem cycling is a serious sport. That's a Paralympic sport. I mean, there's real athletes, that are blind and do cycling. When I got to the blind school in Augusta, I was just a few months behind Brad Snyder, who's a Navy EOD tech who had lost his eyesight, and he's this amazing dude. But being a Navy guy, he's a swimmer, he's a diver, and when he got to Augusta, he would train in the pool nearby, and every time I saw him, he's like, "Hey, Aaron, you want to go swimming with me?" And I haven't been much of a swimmer in a long time, and I'm like, blown out of eardrums. I have to wear cotton balls into the shower. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm like, phew. But after he graduated from blind school, he went to the London Paralympics and won 3 medals. Then he's been to the next 2 Summer Paralympics and won more medals. I mean, wow. The guy's a heck of a swimmer.
Yeah.
And now he's doing triathlons. So there was just definitely this misconception about what we're capable of. And it just, for me, it totally broke through this glass ceiling. And then I was just thinking, okay, it's not that I can't do anything. I just got to figure out a new way to do it. And my whole philosophy was, you got to figure out, it's not that I can't, it's just, how can I?
Right.
It wasn't, why is this happening to me? It's, why is this happening for me? What can I learn from it? And that's what I did. I started running marathons, and I started climbing these mountains. I joined Eric Weinmeier on the 10th anniversary of his Everest Summit. He took a whole team of wounded veterans, because his dad's a Marine, and he took a whole team of wounded veterans up a 19,000-foot peak in the Peruvian Andes, called it Soldiers to Summits. And I was on that team. The funny thing was, we started off towards towards the summit on that that day at 3-4 in the morning, and it's so dark. Everybody's complaining that they can't see where they're putting their feet. I'm like, welcome to my world, people. And it was an amazing experience. But then it was just, okay, nothing is off limits, except maybe helicopter pilot. But almost nothing is off limits for me. I just got to figure out how to do it. And then it was my whole life became an adventure all over again.
It's, I mean, it's truly fascinating. It's incredible. It's a testament to you and all and everybody else. You know, every other service member, but everybody else who is blind, like
Yes, things I would never even think about.
It's so hard to imagine, of all the senses, of all the things. It feels as though, for you know, yeah, just it's so hard to imagine what that would be.
I saw, or I listened to, I'm sorry, I don't see much anymore. But I listened to another podcast, and somebody was talking about a blind guy that was a food chemist. And was talking about how most people, most humans get about 96% of their information through their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That's not because it's mostly because we've stopped, we become too reliant on our eyes, and we don't pay as much attention to other senses. And that's when it's funny when people ask if the other senses have gotten stronger. Well, I'm deaf, and the blast cut right across my nose. I kind of have a diminished sense of smell, which is linked to my taste. Don't ask me. But I tell people, if I need to navigate, I gotta go down on the hands and knees and lick the concrete. But it's true that we don't pay attention to our other senses, and every once in a while, it really is a good thing to maybe close our eyes and just take a deep breath, and listen really hard beyond that point of boredom, because that's when we really start paying attention. But I think everything was going really well. I'd done all these ventures. I was speaking. I was teaching for a while. I was running these marathons, and spring and early summer of 2015 were epic. I went to Colorado and climbed 3 14ers in a day. I went hunting in Texas. I don't know if you guys can see up above over my shoulder there. That dude. I went to Yellowstone in Montana with my buddy Lonnie. Went kayaking. Skydiving, which I don't know, that was okay, but it's kind of like sticking your head out a fast car for me. And I was 2 weeks away from heading out to Tanzania to climb Kilimanjaro when I got knocked down to the mat again. I contracted bacterial meningitis, and I was sent right back to the hospital. Man, the cracks in my skull that hadn't been fully patched. 4 years later, a path out is also a path in, and the bacteria crept right into my brain and was trying to kill me. And in the process, I survived, but it had also stolen what was left of my hearing, and it left me completely deaf. So, when the doctor was breaking the news to me, it actually felt like I was underwater. I was so congested, and I had my mom in the room, my girlfriend in the room, and I was talking to this doctor. I was like, "Doc, what you're telling me is I'm going to be completely 100% blind and 100% deaf. You mean I'm never going to have to pretend to pay attention ever again?" There's a silver lining to everything. Yeah, of course. I blame the meningitis, but I didn't hear my mom or my girlfriend laugh. But even though I really do like using humor to diffuse the situation. Man, that was awful news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a kick in the balls. Yeah.
Man, I was just hitting my stride.
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
I was on my way to mastering this blind thing, and there I was. And also, just like the blindness had an added bonus gift, because I lost those inner ear, the little hair follicles in your cochlea, I also lost my vestibular balance, the inner ear gyro. So I lost my sense of balance. It was like vertigo, but weirder, because it was like always. So, I mean, thank goodness for those handicap rails in the bathrooms, because I would fall right off the toilet. I came home in a wheelchair, and man, I was pissed. Again, is the same calling my demons, the what ifs, the why me's. I'm like, when has this guy paid his fair share? When is enough enough?
Right.
You know, when has this soldier sacrificed? Right? You know, when can you just give it to another guy? You know?
Yeah. It's one more thing taken from you.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there, like at the counter in my kitchen, right, holding on to the counter to not fall off the stool, and there would be a chance I could regain some of my hearing with a cochlear implant, which is not a hearing aid. Like, my ears are turned off permanently, but I'd have to wait till the meningitis, like the infection, cleared up. Then they would do surgery on my right side, the more damaged ear. And for anybody watching, I'm not wearing one right now, because after getting the surgery, waiting weeks for it to heal up, then getting the external processor tuned in, found out that it didn't work. It was just too much inner ear scarring for the implant to work. Then I have to start the process all over with the left ear. And it was over 6 months from, infection to the first sound, whatever you want to call it. It's a digital signal sent right to my auditory nerve. My brain had to learn how to hear again, a different way, and how to interpret this different sound. And it's nothing like the real thing. It's kind of like calling a friend at a restaurant, and he just puts it on speaker and puts it in the middle of the table. You just hear every imperfection on the table, around the table, clinking, the other conversations. It all kind of mixes into a wall of sound. Yeah, but it's way better than the alternative.
Right.
Because for six months, I was locked inside my body. I mean, it was just trapped. Silent, dark, could not get a message in. I was thinking, damn, I should have learned Braille at blind school. But all that tech, it made me lazy. It's hard to, it's funny to say.
Right.
But
it's like, the only thing I can even think to liking it to is it's like you're in a submarine by yourself with no sonar, like just isolated.
Mm-hmm. And for a social guy like me, that sucked. And so, how frustrating and lonely it is. And, people, we went through the whole COVID quarantine era, that period, and people were complaining about the isolation. Like, that's nothing.
Right.
But sitting there, again, pissed off. And this ironic thought came into my mind. It was like, for 4 years, I've been talking about triumph over tragedy and success through struggle and all this kind of stuff. And God was telling me to put my money where my mouth was. I'm like, jerk. But it was like, okay, well, prove it. And I just remembered all the stuff that I went through the first time, and like I told myself, like, this isn't your first rodeo. You've already done it. You know how to do this. And I remember, just as in like an EOD team, we get this like a tricon or quadcon, it's a shipping container full of tools, from the bomb suits, the robots, and hazmat kits, and all sorts of things. And then you get it on deployment, and you get that armored truck, and it's just not as big as the shipping container, and you can't fit all of your tools. So this 3-person team has to do the prioritize what is most likely to be used in this battle space, and then leave some of the tools behind. And then, of course, we're going on these dismounted missions, walking on foot on these dirt trails, and you can only bring what you can hump on your back. So you got to leave a lot of tools behind. And I love how was it General Jim Mattis put it in Call Sign Chaos? Said it, at least in the Marines, things being hard were never a good excuse for mission failure. Mm-hmm. And I've got a family, I've got a son, I've got this amazing girlfriend. I've got my fellow warriors to think of. That my life doesn't belong to just me, and I'm responsible to them and for them, and I got to figure this out. So I left some tools behind. Mm-hmm. And the mission continues. So I did what anybody in my situation would do: started a fudge company.
What?
Besides getting on the treadmill and holding on for dear life, as I just hit
as the vertigo hits you,
quick start button, just walked half a mile an hour. Mm-hmm. I was also taking my trekking poles that I was using in the mountains, and I did this weird daddy long leg crab walk thing out to my mailbox and back, and I'd be exhausted, but I would do it every single day, a couple times a day. Then we'll go a little bit further, go a little bit faster on my treadmill. And the holidays were coming. Thanksgiving was around the corner, and I decided to stop worrying about myself, stop thinking about my situation, and I was just going to throw a huge Thanksgiving feast. So I started cooking weeks in advance. I started making the cakes and the pies and cookies, just throwing them in the freezer until the day. And I started making batch after batch of fudge, one flavor after another. The combinations were infinite, and I was going to explore them all. And I just kept doing it. I would throw nuts in and spices in. I'd go to the liquor cabinet and dump a little there and dump a little in the mouth. And Michaela, my now wife, said she noticed two things. One was I had a smile on my face for the first time in 6 months. And two, the fudge was piling up. So she snuck it out the front door, like you got to be real stealthy around a blind deaf guy. But she was giving it away to friends and family, friends and neighbors and whoever. And a couple of people came back and said, yeah, hey, this is pretty good. Can we buy some for birthday or something? Office party. And the capitalist in me said, well, of course you may. And all of a sudden we had this business. And it was so funny. And like just months into it, that home gym in my garage, I had, line, I had the treadmill, the rower, the stationary bike, mm-hmm. and then the conveyor belt shrink wrap machine. But it was something to do. It was a project. It was a challenge. And we threw an awesome Thanksgiving. I was happy. We had even some of the stranded EOD students that, didn't have enough leave days or maybe money saved up for Thanksgiving or saved it for Christmas or New Year's. And during the holidays, the base is shut down. So we invite a few students over and share our table. And it was great. It was fun. I didn't worry about not hearing. And the fudge business started taking off. I started running again. And a year after the meningitis, I ran my hometown marathon in Akron, Ohio.
Wow.
The same week of my 20th high school reunion, and got my first sub 4-hour marathon. It was pretty cool. That was an awesome experience.
Unreal. And Aaron, I would like to take just a moment to put a pin or point out that I think you mentioned a little bit before we started recording, actually. Had you been a World War II veteran or a Vietnam veteran, you'd be in a very different place because medical science has advanced so much over the decades. I'm just interested to hear kind of your thoughts of, I mean, in some sense, when we start talking about ocular implants and all these, it almost is like a miracle, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the technology, science, medicine, it's absolutely amazing. This cochlear implant is literally implanted in my head, and it's an electrode that goes into the cochlea bone in the inner ear. And there's an electrode that connects to the branch that basically there's a bundle of nerves that's the auditory nerve. And if you can imagine like a big trunk that goes into smaller and finer roots until it goes into the cochlea and becomes the really fine hair cells that are the actual things that pick up the sound and then bring it, of course, into the brain. Well, the cochlear implant is the electrode that attaches a little higher up on the trunk, the roots. And the way I imagine it is it's just not as sophisticated a sound. It's getting better all the time. And the processor is actually pretty smart. It has different types of modes. But it's more like, in fact, it's like when they first turn it on, they can only give you the primary colors of sound. Mm-hmm. It's a very limited amount of data. So your brain can start learning. And then every few weeks, you go back into audiology, they tune it in with like the soundboard and the computer, give you a little more data, and you learn a little bit more. And they keep tweaking it until you get something that resembles sound. But like I said, it's kind of like, trying to listen to the whole world through a drive-through speaker. But it's amazing. 40, 50 years ago, I would have been pulling the full Helen Keller. Instead, I'm, connected via Bluetooth to my phone, my computer. We're talking to each other via the internet. It's absolutely amazing. Of course, it's also 101 ways I could screw something up. But definitely way better than the alternative.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions for Aaron?
We do. Let's see here. Let me switch over real quick. Aaron, where can people find you right now? If they're, any of your products, any of your social media, anything like that.
Absolutely. I have a podcast, Point of Impact with Aaron Hale, and you can find that at pointofimpactpod.com or on any of the major, podcast outlets and on YouTube. And you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, I think. I don't know. Instagram, I'm not very good at taking photos, but that's at A. Clay Hale. And of course, the main thing is the podcast.
And then you're also, in your bio, didn't I read you're also involved, or you started a charity for building homes for veterans?
Absolutely. Well, I am an ambassador and advocate for a terrific organization called Building Homes for Heroes. And that's buildinghomesforheroes.org. They're the ones that build or adapt, specially adapted homes for severely wounded service members, veterans, first responders, and Gold Star families, like this house I'm in right now. And that's the organization I ran to raise money. I ran Badwater 135 this July to raise money for Building Homes for Heroes.
So everybody, please check that out, buildinghomesforheroes.org. Look, if you got a few bucks, it doesn't take a lot to help out. And
we'll have a link down in the description for you guys if you're looking for it.
Can you tell us sort of like how your house is set up for you in particular that helps you? You're blind, you're effectively deaf except for the cochlear implant. Like, what are the things that people might not know of or that help you?
How could others help me?
No, I'm sorry. In your home, like, what are the sort of accessibility?
It's actually funny because it was they found me right after I left blind school, and they asked, I don't think we've ever adapted a home for the blind. How do we do that? And what kind of special adaptations could you use? I'm like, I don't know. I've been blind for like 10 minutes. And this was also almost 11 years ago. And there wasn't a whole lot of the smart stuff. It wasn't as prolific as it is now. So they put in a talking thermostat, but you still had to go to it and press the buttons and stuff, and it just told you what, they did put different flooring in every room. So as I crossed the threshold from one room to another, I could feel it in my shoes, my feet. One special adaptation really had nothing to do with blindness, or not a whole lot, but I asked him to put one of those pot fillers over the stove. Yeah, the cook guy always wanted one of those.
Right.
So there wasn't really a whole lot of adaptation for me. I was just extremely grateful that I got just an incredible home in the Florida Panhandle, mortgage-free, and it was a wonderful gift.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, everybody, please check that out. Building Homes for Heroes, right? Buildinghomesforheroes.org. So, Luis Vasquez, thank you very much for your donation. Here's his question. What is your favorite Italian dish to cook, and what's the recipe?
Do you want pastry? Are you talking dinner? Are you talking breakfast? This could fill an entire episode itself. I think one of my favorite go-tos is spaghetti carbonara. Very simple.
Yep.
And very delicious. Essentially, you can use pancetta or another type of Italian, cured ham, bacon.
The bacon, yeah.
But really any kind of bacon will work for it. Spaghetti, a little oil, garlic, salt and pepper, one egg, and you've essentially got it. And you can customize it all you want. I've had some fantastic wild boar and truffle carbonara. So it's definitely open to customization, but it's really simple and always delicious.
Sean Walter, thank you very much. Great chat. Aaron, just mentioning creating out-of-cycle training courses for EOD techs. Why wasn't that institutionalized? Cost, personnel, personnel, ? Like, why wasn't that institutionalized from the beginning?
Last question is what?
The out of cycle training that you helped create, why wasn't that institutionalized from the beginning?
Well, I'm not sure why it hadn't begun until I was there. I wasn't the one who dreamed it up. I just happened to be there when it was when it started and helped build it up. But you know, as in life, the service, even over, a couple hundred years, we haven't gotten all perfect. And it takes just one person to say, you know what, we could do something a little bit better. And so a few Joes, a few students that we weren't serving, and we're just sitting around getting a paycheck, but actually not getting better, probably getting worse by sitting around doing nothing. And say, you know what we can do? Let's help them out, and let's make sure they're earning their paycheck. But there's always a way to improve the situation if we just look around.
Thanks. A dog point. Thank you very much. Did your EOD unit have its own culture? Did you guys compete to defuse the most bombs or have bomb jokes? What kind of stuff is in the team room?
Of course we did. There's always competition. There was always practical jokes. The practical joking was one of the big things. Our electronics class, we would build a circuit using the capacitor from one of those disposable cameras, if you could even find those anymore. But you charge up the flash, and then we'd do like those little gator clips on each of the anode cathode of the capacitor, and it takes basically you either hook it to a circuit, or you just complete the circuit with somebody's skin and turn it into a taser. So what we would do is we would conceal this little flash, disposable camera taser thing all over the place, especially under people's chair arms. So they grab each arm, and there's a lead on either underside of the armchair, and zap, they just completed the circuit. And so every once in a while you'd see somebody jump, and everybody start cracking up. But it's pranks, but then we're always it's like that mentality where you always trying to find a way to kill each other and think of new ways to build our own IEDs so that we're better at building them and dismantling them than the enemy. Mm-hmm. Plus, shocking your buddy is hilarious.
Right. And also, Dr. Point, thank you very much. Could you describe your experience defusing your first few bombs? How did your reactions before, after, and during change as you became more experienced?
Yeah, there's definitely that nervousness, excitement of being a novice. Though we trained so hard, and I'd spent time in Iraq, and then I'd spent time stateside working stateside response, just things in old things of TNT from the farmer's barn to something Grandpa brought back from the old war as a souvenir. And I'd had practice on some of these things before getting out to Afghanistan and hitting the prime time. But yeah, that first time, you're pretty nervous. It's good that we do that right seat, left seat thing. You get to be right there next to somebody who's been doing it for a while. And then they watch over your shoulder as you do it. And then the last handshake, high five, whatever, fist bump, and it's your AO. And by then, pretty comfortable in the role. And before you knew it, we were really, running and gunning and doing tons of these things every day. So it never gets boring. It never really, you shouldn't ever get complacent or anything like that. They're explosives.
Right.
And who knows if the next one just goes wrong. So you're always alert. But you get more comfortable in your own skills, right? You trust yourself a little bit more to be able to handle the situation ahead. And it also is all about trusting your team and their abilities and the other resources, the other team, the key players on the battlefield, in battle space. And there's a lot going on there, and there are a lot of resources at your disposal. You just got to remember that all of that is part of your situational awareness.
And Aaron, this question is for me. How horrible is the hurt locker and why?
God, don't get me started. Man, I don't even call it that. I call it that ouch closet or pain cabinet or something. It was so funny. I was at the FBI anti-terrorist office in Manhattan, that Joint Operations Center there. And somehow that movie came up, and I'm like, I was just complaining about how stupid it made us look. And the guy is like, have you ever watched a movie with an FBI agent in it? They make it all of us look stupid all the time. So welcome. Yeah, it's so funny. I'm like, yeah, you're right. You guys look awful.
Yeah, I was introduced. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
No. It's just that who picks up. It was like 5 155s all daisy chained together with dead cord. Who just picks them up? By the way, you can't do that with one arm.
Yeah, he's throwing smoke between him and his security forces. I had a couple civilian friends introduce me to that movie. Like, oh, you got to watch this, so amazing. And I was so angry during the entire movie.
Stop.
You guys think this is good?
There is one scene in that movie that I liked that I could relate to. This the scene where he comes back from Iraq and he's in Walmart,
the grocery store,
and he's just completely overwhelmed by all the lights and all the super abundance of it, right? And I had that exact same experience, standing there for 45 minutes, I don't know what to do.
Yeah,
what am I doing? And just left.
It was the only piece of truth or truism. Now, what I didn't understand was I don't know. Even if you put aside all of the artistic license with the operations of EOD, it was a terrible story. It was so disjointed. I didn't know what was going on. It just went from one stupid act to another. There was no plot at all. Who was he fighting? What was the meaning of any of it? He just did this, did that, said something stupid. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die comfortable. And then he's staring at some guy holding a battery or a cell phone or something. They have a meaningful moment as they look broody at each other. And then he's standing in a grocery store, and then he goes back on the planet.
Yeah.
This didn't make any sense to me. It was a terrible story.
Yeah.
Aaron, as we wrap up here tonight, is there any questions that we failed to ask, or any final thoughts that you want to throw out there? Anything you think we missed?
No, you guys have let me talk far too long. I really do appreciate you having me on, and have your ear and your audience here for a little while telling my story. I hope it was worthwhile. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I know I am. Sometimes it's not the best days, but most of the time I love my life. All the time I love my life. Most of the time I'm having a great day, and I'm just doing it because I love my fellow, my service members, love the veterans, my family. I love getting out there, running, doing adventures, talking on my podcast, or making fudge, or investing in real estate. All of it is a really cool challenge. Every day is a new opportunity, and I'm glad I got to share a little bit with you guys.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing it with us. I mean, it's a great story. I mean, it's a great life, and I really appreciate you kind of like giving us a sort of like very personal insights into it.
We deeply appreciate it, for sure.
I didn't even mention that my wife and I had identical twins, so I wouldn't be the only one that's confused.
I mean, there are a couple of things that have passed by in the sense of you went on your first hunting trip you went on a hunting trip, you have the trophy behind you, and you didn't Dick Cheney anybody. So Dick Cheney really has no excuse.
Nobody's going to know about that in a few years. It's not going to be funny. What are you talking about? Who the hell is Dick Cheney?
Maybe they'll Google it after they listen to this podcast.
Oh, he's been. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I have to tell him.
And then I think that, with, you're running, you're mountain climbing, you're kayaking, everything you're doing, with Jack and I both being comic book geeks, the only question is, when are you going to don a mask and start fighting crime? It sounds like you're ready for it.
So after Badwater, I don't know. I'm just taking a little time off, let my toenails grow back.
Daredevil did it, man.
My wife and I really love doing the fixer-upper houses, turning them into rentals, and building a portfolio. So I really think I'm just going to focus on business a little bit more,
Fair enough.
do the maintenance miles, and stay fit. I'm definitely not going to be able to stay off the road for very long. I'm probably going to find a pretty cool ultramarathon out there fairly soon.
Awesome, man.
Amazing.
Yeah, please stay in touch, and we're happy to promote some of these things and put them out there as they come about. And again, just thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. And for everyone out there, we'll see you guys on Friday with Tommy Shook, inductee into the Ranger Hall of Fame. Had a very long career. Excited to talk to him this Friday.
And Aaron, you can hang on for a second, and everybody else